What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we are going to be doing a complete hero guide for one of the most improved characters in Star Wars Battlefront 2, that being Finn. In these hero guides, we are going to be covering everything that could possibly need covering, from base stats, ability stats, the best star cards for Galactic Assault and Supremacy, as well as some of the best maps to choose them on, some general tips for those game modes, the best star cards for heroes vs villains and HvV Showdown, which enemies you need to look out for, and then lastly covering some general tips for the hero game modes as well. So as you can see, this guide is going to be breaking down every single aspect of the hero. If you're new around here and you end up enjoying this video, then be sure to subscribe to the channel for more Battlefront 2 content, and be sure to hit that notification bell as well so that you are notified each time I upload more videos like this going forward. But anyway, with that out of the way, let's get stuck right into it. So starting off with Finn's base stats, and to be honest, his base stats are definitely not the best in the game, but his abilities more than make up for that either way. Starting off with his base HP, he has 600, which is pretty much the lowest in the entire game, equal with Bosk and Boba Fett. And as for how much health he can regenerate at once, his regen is only 200, which is essentially the average for most blaster heroes in the game. In terms of his EL-16's damage, each shot deals 45 damage to the body at long range and 52 damage at close range, and as for headshots, it deals 85 damage to the head at range and 98 damage to the head up close. So as you can see, the damage drop off at range is hardly anything at all, making him pretty well rounded no matter what distance you're fighting at. His rate of fire works out to be 240 shots per minute, which is somewhere right in the middle. It's definitely slower than the likes of Iden or Phasma, but it's also much faster than the likes of Han or Bosk. He can fire 24 shots before the weapon will need to cool down, and as for the spread, his EL-16 has probably some of the best spread in the entire game, as it stays tight and accurate even if you just hold down the trigger. Now moving on to his abilities, and his ability set is honestly where he becomes really decent. None of his abilities are the best in the game or anything like that, but they're all really solid, and they all serve very different purposes, making him very well rounded. His left ability is his Deadeye ability, and this one essentially just gives Finn an aimbot while it's active, locking onto anyone within close to mid range and making sure that each shot hits. It has a 15-second cooldown time after you've used it, which is pretty great for how OP this ability can be, and it doesn't really have any damage drop off, dealing 28 damage at its furthest distance and 30 up close. Now if you activate the ability and don't fire a single shot, it will last for 25 seconds, or if you activate it and fire the whole time, it'll only last 5 seconds. So its active time is just different depending on how much you use it, but really every time you use it, you're likely going to be firing the whole time, so 5 or 6 seconds is probably the average time. Moving on, we have his middle ability, which is called Big Deal, and this ability is without a doubt his best ability, and honestly maybe the best team-based ability of any character in the entire game. When activated, it lasts for 10 seconds before needing a cooldown, which is around 18 seconds, so you can use it around a third of the time that you're alive. Now this ability gives nearby allies 120 extra HP plus 25% damage reduction. It removes their weapon cooldown, meaning they can essentially fire infinitely at least for 5 to 10 seconds, and it gives a 100% faster ability cooldown speed. So if your allies have abilities that take say 10 seconds to cool down, then this will cause them to cool down in 5 seconds instead. As you can probably tell from all of that, this ability is so damn useful for team play and holding down or pushing objectives. If you've got 5 or 6 allies nearby and you pop this, then it's going to be pretty hard for the other team to handle. Now for his right ability, we have Undercover Team, and this one mentions that it gives a faster sprint speed, removes you and your teammates from the radar, and also reveals enemies within a certain distance as well. Not only that, but Finn pulls out his Glee 44 pistol as well, which has a much faster rate of fire than his EL-16. Now upon testing, I'm not sure if this is just bugged in arcade or if it's bugged in general, but this does not actually increase his sprint speed or ally sprint speed either, so just be sure to keep that in mind. Just like Deadeye, it lasts for 5 to 25 seconds depending on how much you use that Glee 44, and it requires a 15-second cooldown before the next use. So that is it for all of his base stats and abilities, and now we're going to move on to some tips for Galactic Assault and Supremacy, starting off with his best star cards. Keep in mind these cards are just a matter of opinion. There aren't any loadouts in the game that are objectively the best or anything like that, but these are just what I find to work the best in these modes. The first card I'd recommend is his Stay Calm card, and this one just increases the active time of Deadeye by up to 40% with each kill. This card allows you to really chain together some nice multi-kills with Deadeye, which is obviously his most deadly ability, and if you're on any maps where enemies bunch up, then you can genuinely turn like 2 to 3 kills with Deadeye into a 10-man multi-kill, so this one is great for adding to his offensive strength. The second card I'd recommend is the One Resistance card, and this one makes it so that Big Deal's cooldown time is reduced by up to 40% on the next use if you affect 3 or more teammates with it. More often often than not you are going to affect 3 teammates, and so allowing this ability to be used so much more often when it is such an insane ability is obviously very handy. The third card I'd recommend is the In Charge card, and this one makes it so that for each kill or 100 damage on villains with undercover team active, it'll give you and your teammates 2% damage reduction while it's active to a maximum of 36%. If you can get 10 kills with his Glee 44, which is by no means a huge task, then that's already 20% damage reduction each time you use this ability. That means that 2 of your abilities give 20 or more % damage reduction to you and your teammates. So again, this just adds so much to his team play and can cause your team to become incredibly hard to beat. Now, if you're more just looking to go for kills rather than playing for your team, which to be honest with Finn is not really the way to go, but if that is what you're after, then one of those cards can be replaced by the No More Running card, which just makes Deadeye have up to 12 more damage per shot after you get 3 kills with it. Now, moving on to the best maps to choose him on in Galactic Assault, the 3 maps that I personally think he's best on are Geonosis, Endor, and Hoth. These are just the 3 that I've seemed to do the best with him on over the last 3 years. Geonosis is great for the long lines of sight where his EL16 is so dominant, and then Endor and Hoth are both great too because of the mix of that long range as well as those tight areas in the final phases where his Big Deal and Deadeye abilities become so dominant. Now, moving on to just some general tips for Galactic Assault and Supremacy, and as I've mentioned a few times now, Finn is just crazy good when it comes to his team play. His EL16 and Deadeye are both great for getting kills, so he can be very decent in that regard too, but in my opinion he's far better utilised when he's holding down objectives or helping his team push in and attack certain areas. With pretty much any hero in the game, it's always a really good idea to stick near some teammates as somewhat of a safety net. The more allies you have nearby, the less likely you usually are to be killed, but with Finn that is amplified even further. With Big Deal making everyone on your team such a tank as well as yourself, when you can gather 5 or more allies to fight with you and press the enemy, then that little group is rarely ever going to lose a battle. Let's just say that it's you and 5 troopers and you come up against like Iden and 5 troopers on the other team. Well, if you have Big Deal active and even undercover team as well, 99 times out of 100 you will not lose that battle as a team, because collectively you're going to have about 500 or 600 more HP as well as 25% damage reduction on top of that, and then to add to all of that, your blasters won't overheat and your abilities cool down at twice as fast. So you can see from that example just what I mean about him being so great at team play. With Finn, the only tricky thing is really to do with his positioning, because often your teammates can gravitate towards you when you're in a good spot on the map. However, if you are too far forward or too far back on the map, your teammates will be a lot less likely to hang around you, and therefore you're losing one of your biggest strengths, which is those teammates. If you're way up ahead of your teammates chasing kills and trying to be a hero, then more often than not you're just going to get killed very quickly, because for how great Finn can be surrounded by teammates, he kind of lacks all of that strength when he's on his own. The same thing can actually happen if you're too far behind your teammates sitting at the back of the map trying to pick off enemies from a distance. They're going to be so much weaker without you, and therefore they won't be nearly as effective in and around the objectives. So even if you're getting a few kills from far away, your team is still generally going to lose the game if you're not helping. The sweet spot with Finn is usually being right up near the front lines but not pushing too far ahead. Buff your teammates, let them sort of feel, I guess, inspired to push ahead and test the waters, and then slowly move up with them, essentially sitting 5 or so meters behind so that you're still hitting them with Big Deal and you can still cover them, but you're not the one risking your life first. That does sound fairly selfish in a way, but at the end of the day the team is better off if you're staying alive, as you can continue to buff them and trooper deaths are far less important than hero deaths. So let them be the ones to push into the objectives first, but in saying that, don't just abandon your teammates either. It's all about finding that sweet spot and being close enough to be a huge help while not being too close to where the enemies are going to melt you before you can be of any use. To summarise, your biggest strength in these modes is your teammates, and you're their biggest strength as well. Working together to PTFO can cause your team to become near on unstoppable, and as for the positioning, it does come down to a lot of playtime and practice, but find that sweet spot of just being a few steps behind your teammates in order to help, but to not put yourself in too much immediate danger whenever possible. So moving on now to the hero vs villain game modes, and honestly Finn's playstyle and strengths in these modes are borderline identical to his playstyle and strengths in the trooper game modes. Starting off with his star cards, and the first card that I mention is the one resistance card that I mentioned for the other modes. If you're playing right near all 3 of your teammates, then Big Deal is going to become a game changer with how often you can use it, and to be honest, 4 heroes playing right next to each other with 25% damage reduction, 120 extra health and half ability cooldown speeds will never lose a game of HvV if you're playing it smart. Now, I will quickly say that if you're playing Showdown, then obviously this card is redundant, so I would personally replace it with essentially any other card that you feel is useful, as this one is redundant with only one teammate. The second card I'd recommend in these modes is the Come Get It card, which extends the duration of Big Deal by up to 15% with each headshot that you land. Now, with Finn's blaster being so damn accurate, it's actually super easy to hit headshots, and if you can land like 3 or 4 headshots during Big Deal's active time, you're going to add on nearly 5 extra seconds, which is useful for obvious reasons. The third card I'd recommend is his Raise to Do One Thing card, and this one just increases the lock-on distance for Deadeye by up to 25%. This helps a hell of a lot when it comes to characters like Bosk, Boba or Palpatine, as they're all completely defenseless, and putting more range between you and them gives you a much better chance of taking them out without taking too much damage yourself. Now, moving on to some enemies that you might need to keep an eye out for in these modes, and honestly the only two that I think are really deadly are Vader and Count Dooku. Vader doesn't really need an explanation, he's super OP right now, and then as for Dooku, you can do really well against Dooku if you play it right, but if he targets you and gets close, you're generally just going to die due to his spin speed and his damage output. There's not a lot you can do against Dooku as a blaster hero once he does get close enough. Now, finally moving on to just some regular tips for the hero game modes, and as much as I always try and give as many pointers for these modes as I do for GA and Supremacy, it's honestly impossible to do that for Finn. Finn's playstyle in these modes is pretty much identical to GA and Supremacy. Stick with your teammates, keep everyone buffed, and try to deal as much damage to enemies while they're preoccupied with your teammates. I often get kind of annoyed when these sections are shorter than the GA section, as I like to give all modes as much focus in these guides, but honestly with Finn it is just as simple as that. Play together with your team and you will do well with Finn. Play solo and try and be a hero, and sure, you can still do decent, but you're much less likely to do well as a team, and on top of that, I'd imagine most people watching this guide are newer or less experienced players who might not be able to fare quite as well with Finn in a one-on-one. Your sole purpose in these modes is to be a supporting cast to your teammates, especially the likes of Luke or Han, who are usually going to carry the team with the most kills. So like I said, if you just help them out with Big Deal and deal as much additional damage as you can, your team is going to do very well. To summarize, a good team-oriented Finn player in HvV is, in my opinion, the best character in the game in terms of winning games anyway. You might come dead last on your team, you might only get 5 kills and 3 deaths or something, but if you play your role, you honestly will not lose unless your teammates are bots or unless the other team are MLG pros. So that is going to do it for this Finn hero guide, guys. I am very keen to keep on pumping these out over the coming months, and so let me know down in the comments which characters you guys would like some guides on. If you enjoyed the video and it did help you out, then be sure to leave a like down below to support the channel, and be sure to subscribe with those notifications on so you don't miss out on any more Star Wars Battlefront 2 content. Thank you all so much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.
Crush them! Make them suffer!